Hi, everybody. Welcome to my top 10 reads of 2023 with no repeat authors, no repeat series, and no rereads. And this will be ranked. However, my ranking is subject to change tonight, tomorrow. It may change. Before getting into the top 10 list, I am going to give some honorable mentions in the form of rapid fire awards. The first category is non fantasy surprise. So, will this go to Disgrace by Coetzee following a white college professor in South Africa who sets his eyes upon a young female student? Or will it go to Butcher's Crossing by John Williams, a Western story that critiques American ideals as a young man seeks to find himself in Buffalo country? Or will this go to Babel 17 by Samuel Delany, a space opera following Rydra Wong, a prodigy linguist and poetess who is trying to uncover the secrets of a language that could be potentially deadly? And the winner goes to Disgrace by Coetzee. Now for the reread category, will this go to A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin, Stranger with My Face by Lois Duncan, or Midnight Tides by Stephen Erickson, Book 5 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen? The winner, A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin. For a new to me fantasy creature, will this go to the companions in the Arrows trilogy by Mercedes Lackey, which appear like horses but are not horses and are very intelligent? Or will it go to the potentially self annihilating elf in the Edan trilogy by Philip Chase? Or will this go to the Illinois, which are these red hair demonic creatures that appear like women in the Elric series, specifically The Vanishing Tower? And the winner is, of course, the elf in the Edan trilogy by Philip Chase. For favorite romance book, and I've only read 3 romance books this last year, will it go to the modern day gothic fairy tale, The Last Tale of the Flower Bride? Or will it go to a classic comedy, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen? Or will this go to All Roads Lead Here, which is a contemporary fantasy story set in Colorado? And my winner for this is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Next, nonfiction. And for my nonfiction picks, will it go to What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Murakami, or Good Anxiety by Suzuki, or Disfigured by Amanda Leduc? I recently gave this away in a previous video, but my answer will be Disfigured. Next is historical fiction, and I only have 2 nominees for this category: Shogun, an Asian Saga by James Clavell, or Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. And my winner is Shogun. Now, on to the top 10 list, and I want to go ahead and say that I won't go in depth about each of these books, but I will link in the description any relevant videos in case you want to hear more detailed thoughts. So, coming in at number 10, Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch. So, this is the third installment in the Gentleman Bastards series, which is an unfinished series. Maybe low expectations helped because I understand it is very unpopular among fans of the series, or maybe a least favorite. But everything about Scott Lynch's writing style just particularly works for me. I loved his witty prose and humor and settings, and the flashback sequences were on an equal level for me as the present day timeline. Even though there were some larger plot aspects to this story that I just am suspending my judgment about. I'm not sure about. I guess it'll depend on whether we get a fourth book and where that will go. I still really enjoyed these characters and the story. Coming in at number 9, The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. And if I have to choose one, it's going to be A Shadow in Summer, book 1, which is probably the most unpopular opinion, probably even more unpopular than Republic of Thieves, but it just introduced not only the characters and the world and this really interesting magic, but it also made me want to travel more than any other story I've read this year. It is somewhat evocative of feudal Japan. I think there was just something special about the character work and the coming of age storyline in this first installment, but I do think that The Long Price Quartet is really to be read as a whole. It could be one complete story, actually. I just love the way each story, each installment built upon that first story and echoes back to it. So I recommend reading all 4 books in The Long Price Quartet if you're going to read it. But that first story was my favorite. A bit of a slow burn, I guess, for some readers, but for me, it was thoroughly engaging. Number 8, East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I still remember the moment when I finished this book and what I felt. It was so it was so powerful, so bittersweet. This is a modern Adam and Eve retelling, and it really goes into the unconscious desire, what humans do when they are driven by the unconscious need for love, or even the conscious need for love, and some of the disastrous decisions they make. It is a family saga. It's somewhat of a sprawling story. It incorporates a lot of characters over a long span of time. I finished this book, and on the one hand, I was suspended in wonder and awe of it, and at the same time, somewhat sad, but not in a bad way. I think it was perfectly executed, and I will never forget the way this book made me feel. My number 7 choice is Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny. Now, what I think was so special about this book was the blend of elements, because on the one hand, it's very zany, it has very quirky humor. We are dealing with people posing to be gods of the Hindu pantheon and themes regarding technology and whether humankind is ready for certain kinds of technology or whether it will cause destruction overall, and whether that should be controlled at some level, and whether the people in control should be the ones in control. And it's about rebellion. It's about Buddhism as well. It touches on Buddhist themes such as attachment and reincarnation and love. And yet, it all blended together so well through humor, through great characterization, through amazing visual imagery. And this is a tricky story. It was something that took a while for me to get adjusted to, but by the time I was in chapter 4, I was very much in the flow of the story and very excited for what Zelazny was doing on the page. So I thought that this was just incredible. It was interesting because on the one hand, if you zoom into the story, it feels very mythic and monumental. And then it's like you pan out a little bit and you realize, oh, this is part of just a set. And there's the light man, there's the cameraman, there's the janitor in the background smoking a cigarette. And yet it all seems to work together. So I just love the way Zelazny did that. He brought so much life into this story. And it was a very memorable reading experience to me. And I have my friend Matt to thank for this book. He gifted me the book and join me in a wonderful discussion with Philip Chase. Coming in at number 6 is War Host of Vastmark by Jenny Wirtz. Now, if you have the hardback editions like I do, War Host of Vastmark is going to be the second half of this edition. If you have the paperback editions, then it's going to be the third installment in this series. But I finished this book, War Host of Vastmark, on the morning of my birthday. And I remembered how that made me feel, how special that was, because there were just some powerful moments in that book. There were some scenes that I could easily imagine adapted for opera. Now, I happen to love most opera, but not everybody loves opera. My husband hates opera. He told me that you do not want to know what that sounds like to my ears. That's what he told me about opera one time. So I know it's obviously going to be a little hit or miss depending on Jenny Wirtz's style, which is very specific to this world. It's very rich, but I really love what she did with some of the moments, with some of the tragic moments of the story, with the deceit, the deception, the plays on perception, and the settings again. So this was a very special read for me. That was definitely by far my favorite in the series so far. My number 5 choice is Electric Forest by Kenneth Lee. So I've been talking about this book a lot in the last quarter of the year because it was my introduction to Kenneth Lee. I buddy read this with Secret Sauce of Storycraft, a fantastic channel, and we couldn't say enough good things about this book. We had so much to say once we finished. Ended up rereading parts of the end all over again to understand it even better because there were so many interesting, intricate things that were happening that wrapped everything together in what I thought was a fairly successful and unique project. But this book is unique in the sense that it introduces certain themes such as consciousness transfer, what I would consider beauty standards, and yes, maybe self preservation as well, but also recontextualizes those things as you go on, which I can't give away because of spoilers. So it was a very memorable read for me. And I think the ending might be a little hit or miss for people, but I was personally blown away with what she did with that story. Coming in at number 4 is Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. This is the third installment in the Age of Madness trilogy. And I loved Age of Madness more than the First Law trilogy, more than the standalones, but everything builds up to the Age of Madness. So I do recommend starting from the very beginning of the First Law series and going on from there. But I think that Abercrombie really stepped it up with Age of Madness and especially with Wisdom of Crowds, bringing the societal themes to the forefront, also introducing some incredibly fun and vivid female characters, excellent humor, in my opinion. His humor just lands for me, and I just had the best time. I was thoroughly entertained with Wisdom of Crowds, and I was satisfied with the ending, which I think is a bit of an unpopular opinion. I've talked to a couple of people who weren't as satisfied with that ending, who maybe wanted some loose ends tied up here and there, but I was satisfied with it. I had a great time, and I felt on a high when I finished that book. Now, of course, all top 10 lists are very personal, depending on the person who's creating them. And so my number three choice is especially personal, and that is All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. This has very special personal significance for me. It has stayed with me all year long. It is a coming of age story following a young man, John Grady, as he makes his journey across the Texas Mexico border. And what I love about this story are the nuances of culture from that time and place, the way that McCarthy is able to describe the differences between Texas at that time versus northern Mexico. He inserts Spanish into the dialogue. He has little tiny details, such as flipping a tortilla on the comal. And that really spoke to me as someone who is from the Southwest and who has family in northern Mexico. I just felt like I resonated with it so deeply, even some of the locations he described. And of course, McCarthy, in my opinion, has a gift for setting, for atmosphere. And I think that the story has an overall satisfying arc to it. Like I said, it is coming of age, there is forbidden love. And I just thought that the growth and depth of this character developed so beautifully throughout the story. So I personally resonated with this one. And I don't even know if I can watch the movie. I know there was a movie adaptation, but I don't know if it will do it justice compared to my feelings about this book. So this has to make my list. My number two favorite book of 2023, Pet Cemetery by Stephen King. This book explores death and grief in a horror story, and the horror elements support those themes. King says at the beginning of this book in the foreword that this is the most frightening book he's ever written. And I wouldn't say it's frightening in a jump scare kind of way, though there are outwardly horrible things that happen on the page in the story. It's it's not only that, it's also the psychological horror that's occurring in this story that makes it so impactful. And King has a way of doing it all. He has a way of blending all those things together, and he sets it up so well with this character that we follow. King gives very realistic insights into how grief can change us as a person, how it can affect our rational mind, how it can affect relationships and perception of time. So I'm so glad I got to this in 2023. A couple of my friends did accurately guess my favorite book of 2023. You know who you are, but it is A Song for a Bun by Guy Gavriel Kay. So I did do a spoiler-free review of this book in which I talked about how this impacted me in a very personal way. Again, getting very personal here. But what I thought was so powerful about this book was not only the contrasting societies that are introduced and the explorations of gender and courtly love, chivalry, troubadours, but the impact of song. I have never before read a book where song was used not only as a world building element, but also as a way to directly affect character motivation and some of the larger political things that happen in the story. And not only that, it's also an excellent story overall. It has excellent character work, it has excellent humor at times, it has beautiful moments. It moved me to tears at times. So yes, A Song for a Bun. I love this book. It is definitely a new favorite. It is a standalone, and I look forward to reading more Guy Gavriel Kay in the future. So that is it. That is my list. Those are my top 10 reads of 2023. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being here, for being part of my journey this last year. If you were here, if you're new here, thank you so much for watching this video, and please consider subscribing. And please let me know down in the comment section below if you've read any of these books, if you're surprised by my number one or my choices, and also your favorite book if you'd like to share. So thank you and have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.